All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out. It's great to have so many of you come out. I'm sure some other people will be coming in as we get started, but we want to honor your time, so we're going to get started. My name is Kristen Fox. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction.
I am Sherry Howarth. I'm one of the assistant principals here at the high school.
So we're going to turn this over in a moment to our Director of IT, but we wanted to take a minute to just give you some context to tonight's discussion. Projected behind me is on our district website. You can find this on the district website. You can find this on the Ridge High School website. Some of you may already be familiar with our initiative this year on restoring focus, but if not, I would encourage you to visit this site, which Ms. Howarth will walk you through in just a minute, and see all the things that we're doing and talking about on this really important subject. So I'll turn this over to Ms. Howarth in a minute. I just wanted to mention that as a part of our efforts this year to have a dialogue on this topic and to consider what, if any, changes to policy we want to consider within the schools, we are offering a number of events that you may want to participate in. And this tonight is the first in a series that's going to be called Technically Speaking, that we will run different topics based on interest that comes from the community and things that come out of our discussions on this topic, starting with tonight's session. So you can find all of the events, including the Technically Speaking series, on this calendar page. And before I turn it over, I want to mention to you that Technically Speaking 2 will be November 4th, just in a couple weeks, where I'll walk you through the Genesis Parent Portal and the new family calendar. So a little bit different from the Restoring Focus conversation, but something that I know a lot of parents have been asking for and would benefit from some time navigating the all-important Genesis Parent Portal. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Howarth.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristen. So this summer we started these discussions really just to begin some awareness, to have discussions with the community and the school to see what we could do for our students to help them restore their focus. So there are a lot of events coming up. A couple of them are book talks. One is actually going to be tomorrow evening. These are books that the administrators have read and are discussing and really want community feedback along with student feedback as well. One of the parts of this website that I'd like to, I'm sorry, I'm very challenged when it comes to this. Maybe I need to come from this side. I give you credit, Sean. Good job. One of the tabs on the website that I wanted to just draw some attention to, the middle school and the high school starting in November are going to be doing a 4-week screen time challenge. So some of the things, some of the metrics that we'll be looking at are probably things or potentially things that Mr. Beavers will be going over this evening, but really this is to just first raise awareness for our students about the amount of time that they're on their phones, the amount of time they're spending on social media and other apps, and then really kind of noticing how it impacts them, and by the end of the 4 weeks, beginning to develop a personal plan for themselves. We're really encouraging families to become involved as well and do this as a family. And so there's a lot of really great information on this website. You can get to this website by going to the Ridge High website, and it's linked there, and I believe right on the Bernards Township District website as well. So without further ado, I hope to see all of you come out to some of our events moving forward, but I know you're here to learn all about parental controls and technology with your students. So without any more delay, I'm going to turn it over to the Director of Information Technology, Mr. Sean Beavers.
No, I'm challenged. I can't get this. I guess get this screen back over here. All right. So just a couple of housekeeping items. One, this is being recorded this evening, so I believe the recording will be up on the district website. And so if you'd like to watch this again or several times with your family with buttered popcorn and refreshments, you can do that. The link for the presentation for the slide deck is up there, so it's links.bernardsboe.com/parental control. And if you have questions, we will have an opportunity throughout the presentation for you to ask them. But certainly during the presentation, if you have something that you'd like to share or voice, you can use that link at the top of the presentation and submit your questions that way as well. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you all for coming out. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. My kids get very excited when I mention parental controls at the dinner table or just casually as I'm tucking them into bed. All right, now my board was going to work. Here we go. So I just want to start with a disclaimer that I'm not affiliated with any of the services, software, devices, anything that I am mentioning tonight. I'm approaching this from the standpoint as a parent and what I've used and what I've tried, and I've pretty much exhausted my search in terms of tools that are out there. I mean, I'm sure there's some that I'm not aware of, but most I feel like I've kind of explored. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that journey and what that has looked like for me. But again, this is what works in my household, and so your experience may be different. Your mileage may vary, right, depending on your children and their level of maturity and your home, and your unique requirements. So I just wanted to put that out there as a caveat. And in fact, most of the stuff that I'm talking about tonight is absolutely free. So you don't need to spend money or an appreciable amount of money if you're looking for ways that you can have greater control over the devices in your household. So these are my kids. I have a wide spectrum of children from 20 to age 4. I'll be working until I'm a corpse, so that's pretty much my plan. But my daughter is a junior at Ball State in Indiana. I have a middle schooler and then 2 boys, 7 and 4. So trying to make sure that I'm covering all the bases in terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed, you can imagine it's a widespread in our household. I also have a server rack, and I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to brag, I'm just telling you I'm one of those crazy people. I have a firewall at home, well, I did. So I've, really nerd out on this stuff. And I've tried basically all of these things that you see up here. So I tried the Disney Circle when it was a Disney Circle, and then the Circle Plus and Bark. I've had Nest and Orbi and Arrow and Synology, and probably ones I can't even remember, right? Like over the course of the time that my wife and I have been raising kids, I have to thank her and my children because I'm at night putting in the new Wi-Fi system. They're like, is the internet down? They know it's me messing with it, putting in the next system. And they've been very patient with me as I'm going through that discovery of, okay, what works, what doesn't work. Again, given all the devices in our household, right? With 4 kids, everyone's got a tablet or a laptop or a phone. You have smart devices, light bulbs, et cetera. So trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work takes a little bit of time. So I want to give you a roadmap for the presentation so you know exactly what I'm going to talk about and what's going to be covered. So real briefly, I'm going to talk about, kind of what we do here within Bernards Township in terms of making sure the district-issued Chromebooks remain secure and safe. Utilizing what you already have at your disposal right now, some hardware recommendations, some software recommendations, and then we'll wrap up and do a Q&A. That sound good with everybody? That was super enthusiastic. Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate your enthusiasm. All right, so here on site, again, when your children come to school, right, we have a multitude of ways that we ensure that the devices stay safe. One is there are restrictions within Google Workspace for Education that allow us to restrict what they can do on the device, what parts of the device, meaning like, can they use the camera, can they use the USB port, can they plug in a set of headphones, restrictions on their account. We also have Cisco Umbrella, which acts as a filter for content. We have an actual physical firewall, obviously, on site, and then also use something called Gaggle, which scans the contents of email and Drive for anything that might be inappropriate, right? And so when they're home and on that district-issued Chromebook, they're still getting most of those restrictions, right? Still, going through Cisco Umbrella, Gaggle still scanning. But then, again, there's all those other devices that you have at home, game consoles, streaming media players, those types of things. Like, how do you protect them? How do you enforce parental controls? So my advice, or one piece of advice, is utilize what you already have, right? There's things that are readily available that you can use, again, like I said, at no cost, that are excellent, and that's my recommendation. So we're going to cover a couple of different options tonight. One is the screen time, which is for Apple devices, Family Link for Android and Chrome OS, and talk a little bit about different Wi-Fi routers. And I really believe you need to have a two-pronged approach to this, meaning you have some type of hardware in your house, right? You have some type of router that's providing wireless connectivity, right? And you have some type of software that is allowing you to also enforce restrictions through that software, right? So I think using those two, again, what I found in my experience is using those two things in concert together provides the best parental controls in my household. Right, and I'm just trying to, and the goal of this, right, or at least in my mind, the goal for me is just provide guardrails for my children, right, to make sure that as they're navigating and using the internet and social media and everything else that's out there, that I'm providing some kind of structure to what they're doing. So Apple Screen Time is absolutely free. This works on every Apple device, obviously, except the Apple Watch, because why would you want to surf the internet on your watch? I mean, you can, but it'd be a little uncomfortable. And then also the Apple TV. So this works on iPhones, iPads, and Macs. Your child has to be a member of your family group. So some of you might already have this set up if you're sharing applications between family members, or you have an Apple TV Plus subscription, or you have an Apple Arcade subscription, anything like that, you can share within your family. It's up to 5 family members. So that's you as the owner plus 5 more. So it's 6 in reality, right? So in my household, it's myself, my wife, and my 4 kids. If your child is under the age of 13, you would need to create their iCloud account for them if you have not already done so. If your child's over the age of 13 and they already have an iCloud account that they're using with their Apple device, then you can just add them to your family. And that link there at the bottom will walk you through how to set that up. So it's very simple. You can even do this right now. If you don't want to pay attention to anything else I say this evening, you could pull out your, if you had your iOS device with you, you could go into under Family, and you can add your family members to your account. Right, so here you can see I have my 2 boys, my 2 daughters, my wife, and myself. And what you'll find, I think, as I'm going through this tonight, is that most of these products all have very similar restrictions that you can enable. Some of them are a little niche. There is a little bit of differentiation, but by and large, most of the restrictions are all sort of within the same ballpark, right, of what you can do and what you have control over, right? So for screen time, you can schedule downtime whenever you want, right? So if you don't want your children using their devices between the hours of 8 p.m. and 7 a.m., if that's when they're supposed to be sleeping, you can do that. You can set it different for the weekend versus weekdays. But again, you can schedule the time when their devices will be interoperable. App limits. So you can limit app usage per app, right? So I could say you can use YouTube for 15 minutes. You can use Apple Music for an hour. You can use Roblox for 2 hours. Or you can do it by category. So I can say you can use all games on your iPad for 2 hours, right? And then everything else has to be either educational or geared towards productivity. And you can do it globally for all apps. So you could say you have 4 hours total period for anything on your iPad, right, or your iPhone. But there are certain apps that you can allow for 24/7 access. For example, my daughter has 24/7 access to the phone app on her iPhone. So if she's out somewhere, she needs to call us, get in touch with us, she's able to do that. She's just not able to use anything else. You can also set communication limits, so you can decide, who they're able to contact, so either from their contact list, people who aren't on their contact list, everyone. There's some settings for communication safety and also privacy restrictions. So you get a nice glanceable report when you dive into this. So when you open up settings on your iOS or Mac OS or iPad, you can go to screen time and you'll see your children that you've added listed there, and I can get just a quick snapshot of what they've been using either by the week or by the day. So this is my 4-year-old. Both my 4-year-old and 7-year-old are voracious users of Minecraft and Roblox. Like, they would sit there and play Roblox even if the world was falling down around them. So I looked at this and I thought, well, that's not too bad. My son's only picked up his iPad 7 times. I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. And I looked at my 13-year-old and I was like, oh, wow. She's picked up her phone roughly, 75 times in a day. Anybody know where I'm going with this? And then the activity of a 46-year-old, which is me, I picked up my phone on average 138 times a day, which is insane to me. Like, subconsciously, I'm picking the phone up that many times, right? 145 notifications. So I was like, well, my daughter's not doing too bad if she only has, under 80, and I'm well over 100. Number of times you picked it up and opened it. Yep. My wife denies that. I think she was like over 200, and she said it's not possible. So I figure I'll strap a GoPro to her head and film her walking around the house, and we'll figure that out. Downtime, like I mentioned, so you can schedule every day or custom days, right? So I can do, every day from 10 to 7, which is typically what I have set up for my 2 boys, or I could do custom days. You could do it, if there's something going on after school or they have extracurricular activities, you can set specific schedules for each day. And then you can block it at downtime. So as soon as that window hits, the device does not work. Again, unless you allow a particular app beyond that window of time, right? And the child can ask for more time. So they'll get a pop-up on their screen that says, screen time, your time's up, and there's a button there where you can enter your passcode that you've created and give them another 15 minutes or another hour or whatever you want to do. App limits, like I mentioned. So you can see there on the left, for my son, 2 hours of Roblox, 2 hours of the other educational games that he has on his device, and 30 minutes of YouTube Kids. Again, I can do that per app, per category of app, right? So I could do all games, 2 hours, or I could do it by game. So I can say, you can play Geometry Dash for 20 minutes, right? Or you can play Cooking Mama for 30 minutes. So you can get as granular as you want in terms of the amount of time that you're allowing your child to use those particular apps or those app categories. So got the first question. So are the screen time controls the same for both parents? Yes. So again, you have the organizer, then you can add your spouse or significant other as the second person. Both of you have the same level of control over the devices. Communication restrictions. So you can decide, do you want your child to be able to communicate with their contacts only, contacts in groups, or everyone? And then you can also specify what that looks like during the day and during downtime. So the way I have it set up is so that my daughter can only call her favorites, her parents, her grandparents, her siblings, after downtime, right? So she can't call anybody else, she can't call her friends, she can't FaceTime her friends, she can't iMessage her friends. She's just restricted to her favorited contacts after downtime. There also is an option there that you can manage your child's contacts if you want. That's also one of the options. You can enable or disable contact editing. So for a while, I was going in and adding, like my daughter would say, okay, can you please add this person? And I would add whether that was a friend that she was working on a project with or somebody that she was getting together with after school. I was going in and adding those people to her contact list. And in terms of communication safety, this is something Apple rolled out pretty recently, but what this does is if it determines that, and again, this is all done on device, nothing is being transmitted anywhere, but if it determines that the photos or videos that might be transmitted or might be received are inappropriate, it will blur them and not allow them to be transmitted. Content privacy. So installing, deleting, and in-app purchases. You can completely restrict the ability to delete apps, the ability to install apps, and the ability to do in-app purchases. There's a couple times in the past where I had to go back, and my son had spent like, I think it was like $40 or $80 on Robux, and I had to go to Apple's website and request that they refund that because somehow he had purchased all these Robux without any kind of consent. So that's really helpful that you can require a password every time that your child requests an app or if they want to purchase something in an app. You can also allow or restrict native apps and features, meaning you can say you don't have access to the camera, you don't have access to Safari if you don't want them using the browser. You can restrict the web browser so that they can only go to certain sites that you want them to have access to. Then you can also turn off Game Center. So if you don't want them using Game Center for any kind of gaming that's cooperative, you can disable that as well. So these are all the settings. So you can see on the left, for content, you can set it for the different ratings that you want to restrict for your child. So if you want them to only have access to videos and TV shows that are PG or PG-13, or apps that are a certain age level, you can do that. And then on the right-hand side, you can see they don't have the ability to share their location, don't have the ability to change their passcode, change the accounts, and so on. So you can get, again, there's a lot there that you can go through just beyond setting boundaries in terms of when the device can be used and what they're using. Now this is a tack on, no, I shouldn't say a tack on, this is not part of screen time, but it is part of Apple's ecosystem, which is Find My. And this has, I think, become a little bit more prevalent now with the AirTags and being able to use AirTags to find your keys and your wallet and luggage and that kind of thing. But you can also use it to locate the devices, again, that are in your family group. Right, so I'm able to see where my daughter is based on the location of her iPhone or the location of her iPad. And I can also set notifications when they leave or arrive at certain places, right? So I could set a notification when she leaves the middle school in Warren, and then when she arrives at the middle school in Warren, right? So again, that piece of it, the location is all baked into Find My. So what are some caveats with Apple's screen time? One, it's only available for Apple devices, right? So that leaves out a wide segment of devices that you might have at home on your network, right? Or that your children are using. The parental control app, quote unquote app, because it's in the settings, only is on Apple devices. So you would have to change your settings on an iPhone or an iPad or a Mac. There's not a website that you can go to change these settings. You can't broadly block categories of websites. So for example, you can't say you have zero access to any social media websites. You can block social media apps, but that doesn't mean that's going to block all social media if they were to use the browser. It doesn't generate a list of specific websites that they visited, and it does not apply to Apple TV. So again, that may not be a big deal to you, but if you have an Apple TV, if you use that to stream Netflix or Amazon Prime, etc., it doesn't work on that. Yeah, so can you lock the whole device and make it inoperable at a certain time? Yeah, that's where you would just, again, with the scheduled downtime, you could say the device is not operable between 8 p.m., 7 a.m., or whatever you want to set, and then you can set it so they have access to no apps during that period of time. So it becomes a brick. All right, moving on. Family Link. So Family Link is the other side of this equation, and this is available for all Android devices. So if you have any, for example, Samsung Galaxy devices, tablets, phones, or Chrome OS devices, if you have Chromebooks that are not district-owned in your household. This will allow you to do have very similar controls over those devices, just like you do with Apple Screen Time for Apple devices. So again, requirements are similar. Your child or the person that you want to have control over their devices, they have to be in your family group. And again, you can have up to 5 additional members beyond just the person who set it up. Account creation is required for children under the age of 13. And what I like about this is the parent app is available for both Android and iOS. So it doesn't matter, you can run the Family Link app on your iPhone, but set the restrictions on your child's Galaxy device or other Android device. So this is what it looks like. And again, you know, the whole idea of setting up your family group is that you can share services that you pay for across your family, but also anyone in your family group, you can set up Family Link on their devices so that you can have those parental controls. So like I mentioned, very similar options here. This has a little bit different setup where you can lock and unlock directly from the Family Link app. So it doesn't have to be during a specified time. You can just hit lock, the device is locked. You can hit unlock, the device is unlocked. And if it gets lost, you can play a sound. I know that doesn't sound very exciting, but if you've ever lost your phone in your own house, it's super helpful. Same thing, set daily limits and specific app limits and downtime when you don't want them to be using the device. You can restrict content. And again, same thing, location sharing, where you can, on a map, see where your child is, and then also set up notifications as they arrive home, if they leave home. So again, very similar setup to screen time. So this is what you see at a glance, and I apologize, I have used this actually with my eldest daughter. She had a Amazon Fire tablet, I guess is what it's called. So I did use Family Link for that, but I set this up on a test device just so I could show you how this works. My son didn't spend 6 minutes on his Galaxy phone. Like that'd be outrageous. That's no time. But what's nice is you can see at a glance here, you know, the devices, if they're locked, if they're unlocked, and then, like I mentioned, I can go in and look at the average usage of, you know, all the apps that they've had open for that day or that they've used. So again, total amount of time the devices can be used. You can schedule downtime, app limits. So again, for specific apps, this is what it looks like. So in this example, I have a Galaxy phone and a Chromebook, and I can set the amount of time that my child can use those devices. So in this case, I set it for 3 hours. Both devices get 3 hours, right? If you want them to use it for 2 hours, you could set it for 1 hour, and it would give it them an hour each on each device. I can set up a schedule, again, very similar to screen time, where I can say during specific hours when they can't use the device. And then you can even get as granular as, again, how much time you allow specific apps. So if I want them to use Candy Crush for 10 minutes, I can set Candy Crush to 10 minutes. And another thing that's really cool is you can hit app details and get details about the application that you're restricting, right? So it'll take you to the page, you can look at the reviews, you can look at the description of app and decide if it's something you want them to use. In terms of content restrictions, so just like the iTunes App Store, you can restrict purchasing, so they would have to get your approval before they purchased or download any apps. You can restrict the content to certain, again, ratings. And with YouTube, this is a little bit different than with the Apple Screen Time. You can actually force them to use YouTube Kids. So if you don't want them to have the full YouTube experience and you want them to use YouTube Kids along with the channels or videos that you've approved, you can do that. You can even disable autoplay and disable search within YouTube. In the browser, you can unblock or allow specific sites. So if you only want them to have access to particular educational sites on their device, you can set that up. You can force safe search. So when they do a Google search, it'll ensure that the content that they're viewing is not explicit. And then you can disable photo sharing as well. And again, there's a couple interesting ones here. One is you can have them ask you every time that they sign into the device. They wouldn't be able to sign in themselves. I don't know if I'd want to do that. That might be a little cumbersome, but that option's there. And then you can also turn on what they call highlights, where you can see what types of apps and content your child is looking at. So you'll get a snapshot within the Family Link app of sort of what they've been doing, what they've been looking at and using. Again, like I mentioned, you get location alerts, so I can see where those devices are on a map. And you can set specific favorites for your children. Again, like if you want to put their school, home, their grandparents' house, you can put all those locations in there and get notifications either when they arrive or when they leave those places. So again, same thing here. What are the caveats of using Family Link? Children can opt out once they turn 13. When I say opt out, they'll get a prompt on their device. When my daughter turned 13, I said, you're not opting out. You're going to keep using Family Link, and that was the discussion we had. So it's not really an opt-out per se, but they do get a notification that, again, pops up on their device that they could opt out of family time. You can't block broad categories of apps or websites. Children will receive a notification every time you make a change. So that's a little bit different. Screen time doesn't notify the child every time you make a change to the amount of time that they have or if you've changed the setting. Family Link, every time you make a change, it's going to let them know. It's going to pop up on their screen. And it doesn't provide robust controls for communication. So what I mean by that is you can't restrict their contact list or have access to their contact list like you could with screen time. All right, moving on. The hardware piece of this, the Wi-Fi routers. So what I'm going to share with you is, what I've used, what I recommend. I would tell you to go home and, if you haven't already, explore what you already have. Don't spend money that you don't have to spend. So if you know the model that you have, either from your internet provider or that you have in your home, I would look that up, do a search, try to determine if it has parental controls built in. Do that first before you would run out and buy anything else. I would say probably more than likely it does have parental controls built in. Right, so we've covered phones, so now, right, how do we cover all the other devices in your household, right? Gaming rigs, streaming devices, gaming consoles, etc. Right, so popular mesh networking. How many of you have a mesh Wi-Fi system at home? Okay, so a few do, good. These are some of the popular ones. Again, I know I don't have I'm not covering the entire gamut here. There are ones from TP-Link and Asus. These are the ones that I've tried and I've used in my household. So that's what I feel comfortable sharing with you because, like I said, I've used them, I've had them in my environment, I understand how they work. I would not recommend these. That's low spouse approval factor. If you've ever tried to put something like this in your house, doesn't go very well with the plants or the pottery. So just stay away from those. So again, my recommendations. I personally have Arrow at home. Again, I'm not endorsing the product, but that's what I've been using. It's been stable. It's provided the controls that I've needed and wanted for my kids. I think Orbi is also very good. It's a Netgear product. It's their mesh Wi-Fi. And it runs the spectrum. You can spend a couple $100s on a mesh system, or you can spend more than a couple $100s on a mesh system. Entirely up to you. But again, you don't have to spend a tremendous amount of money to get a good working Wi-Fi system. So criteria, or my criteria, very simple. It has to be easy and intuitive to use, right? I have to be able to use it. My spouse has to be able to use it. If it's complex and requires a slide rule and a sextant, and I have to spend hours trying to figure out how to use it, not worth my time, right? I want something that I can easily make adjustments and changes to on the fly, not something that I have to spend hours trying to, again, comb forums on the internet to figure out how to set restrictions. High chance of spousal approval, so basically it has to be unobtrusive. It has to look like a nondescript object, right? Basically like a blob of pizza dough. If the wireless looks like pizza dough, I'm good. I'd like it to be able to have 90% of the features, 99% of the features in the mobile app. I don't want to have to go anywhere else. I don't want to have to go to a special website. I don't want to have to log into it. I just want to have that all available in the app. And again, I just want basic restrictions, right? Time of day, the websites and apps that they can use. So most of these you'll find, and again I say most because there are routers, for example, ASUS has routers that have all the parental controls for free. There's no fee, there's no subscription, and there are others that don't as well. But again, the ones that I've used and the ones that I'm familiar with, there is a subscription cost, right? So Aero has their Aero Plus. It's $9.99 a month or $99.99 a year, so you're saving roughly $40. They do have coupons periodically that you can get for 30 to 40% off. But again, this allows you to set profiles for each and every device on your network, right? So you can set profiles for your gaming consoles, you can set profiles for your kids' laptops or desktops, and anything else that they're using. Again, it's got really good content filters based on their age range. You can block individual applications, you can block or allow specific websites, and you can also, again, schedule time where you don't want them using those devices. So it's very simple. So when you create a profile, it's going to ask you, what age range are you creating that profile for? So is your child pre-K, pre-teen, teen, or adult? And based on that selection, then it's going to come up with, okay, here are recommendations in terms of what we think you should block, or these are the restrictions we think you should place on these devices. And you can, of course, change all of this. It's just going to, again, based on what you pick. So if I say, okay, preteen, it's going to give me these options. It's going to turn on safe search, it's going to turn on YouTube restricted mode, and it's going to block adult content, illegal, criminal, violent, chat messaging, and social media. But again, you can go in there and you can adjust this to your liking. Yes. Yep. So you can set profiles for different kids, different devices, entirely up to you. So I can have a profile for my younger kids, I can have a profile for my older kids, or you could do it by, like I said, if you want to have, you have an Xbox and you have a Nintendo Switch, you could set it just for those. It's totally up to you.
So the router will know which device?
Correct. Because they'll give you a list of all your devices, and you're like, okay, I just want to apply this to these devices. All right, so once you set that up, once you pick that, again, the age range, then you can get a little bit more granular, and I can go in and, like I'm showing here, I can block all these apps by category. So I can go into social media and block everything, and in this case, I'm blocking everything except Roblox, right? And then I can go to the next category, adult sites, and then I can go to the next category, shopping, and just keep blocking all of, and again, it doesn't have every single app, but it's, I would say 80% of probably what you want to block on a device is there. Again, you can block and allow specific websites. So I can go in and make a list of the websites I want them to have access to, and again, this is devices at home. And I can also make a list of the websites that I want blocked. And then scheduled pause, right? So I have different bedtimes set up. Again, weekdays, it's from 9 to 7. The devices are not available. And then on the weekends, it's 10 to 8. And you can create those individually for specific days. Or again, you can do it for weekdays and weekends. It's entirely up to you. So someone said we have a circle, and it does, yes. So the circle, I still have the Circle Plus. It's on a shelf in my basement. I sometimes take it out lovingly and look at it. But what I found is it really slowed my network down. That was the one, again, I thought it worked decently. This is several years ago, and I haven't used it since then, but it really slowed the network down. I think it really depends. Do you have a lot of devices on your network? If you have security cameras, the security system, you have light bulbs, smart displays, whatever you happen to have. If you have a lot of devices, it really is going to tank your internet. And I don't think it matters again, how fast it, like I have a FiOS connection at home, it's a gig, and it destroyed my connection. Like it really slowed it down. I think it would be okay in a household where you have maybe 10, 20 devices, but if you've got more than 10 to 20 devices, the circle just kind of chokes with a lot of devices on your network. In your experience, do the modems in FiOS Tower come with same or similar restrictions? So, like I said, I would check to see if, again, Verizon has lots of different models for their wireless routers. Not like a lot, but there are different ones. I would just look up that model if you can online to see what's built into it. So a mesh router is, for those of you who aren't familiar with the terminology, it just is extending your signal around your house, right? So if you find areas of your house where you have poor Wi-Fi reception, like in the basement or in the attic, well, not in the attic, but let's say, in a particular room, you can put multiple routers throughout your house and it extends the signal so that you have better coverage in every place within your house. That's sort of a really basic description of mesh. So would you use parental controls on the device and also on the router? I would use both, and again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, Screen Time and Family Link are great for, I think, mobile devices. If you want to have controls over their phone and, tablets, but for everything else that you have in your household, again, gaming consoles, streaming, if you want to restrict those things, you need to have those controls on your wireless router or on your wireless mesh. All right, bonus. The other thing that's really nice is you can add up to 10 additional people to help manage those settings within that Aero Plus subscription. I'm not suggesting you add, like that would be like, your spouse, your mom and dad, your grandparents, your uncle, you don't need that many people, but it is nice that you can add additional adults to help manage those settings within the Aero app. Real quick, so this is Netgear. Again, Netgear manufactures Orbi. That's their Wi-Fi mesh system. Similar controls to Aero here. You can have profiles for every device or groups of devices. So again, you can restrict for a particular child and the devices they're using. You get a device usage report as well as a website history report. And what's a little bit different about this is that they do have a mobile app. So you can actually download the My Time app and put it on your child's phone and use that, and they'll get the exact same restrictions on their phone that they get at home on your Wi-Fi. So that's, like I said, that's a differentiator for Orbi. And it's, again, similar pricing, $7.99 a month or $70 a year, which I don't think is outrageous. All right, so just a couple of things to keep in mind. Your child needs to be connected to your primary network. What does that mean? If you have a guest network for people that come over, friends, family, etc., your child can't be connected to that guest network. Typically, your router or your Wi-Fi can't enforce those settings if they're on that guest network. So you want to make sure that they're on whatever your regular primary network is. With Apple devices, something else to keep in mind is, and if you're not familiar with this, I would do a search, but they can have a randomized MAC address, and if you don't know what that means, that's perfectly fine. But sometimes that can also be an issue when you're trying to block those devices and you're not using Apple Screen Time. And again, none of these controls are infallible. That's the other thing to keep, Can a child figure out how to get around all these things? Yes. It's whack-a-mole. And there's no, in my estimation, there's no piece of software or hardware that's going to completely block everything all the time. But it'll do a good job, right? 95, 99% of the time. All right, so what are some additional options? So we're going to talk about, these are some software options, Bark, family monitoring through Verizon, and Firewall is actually hardware. So again, beyond the free options we talked about and the different types of Wi-Fi routers, what are other pieces of software or services that you can pay for? So one is the Verizon Family Monitoring app. Is anybody using this with their kids? Anyone? No? Okay. So you can use this for free, so you do get some free settings with a regular Verizon account. So if you are using Verizon as your carrier and you have your children's devices on Verizon, everything on that left-hand side you would get for free. There is no cost associated with that. So location monitoring, safe walks with SOS alerts, location alerts, review call and text activity, and driving insights for self. That doesn't mean that you're going to get driving insights as the parent. It means that your child, if they're driving, will get driving insights. That's a good question, and that is something that I will, if you speak to me at the end, I can do some research and look it up. I don't know off the top of my head. So Mrs. Hudak, who's the principal of our middle school, she was going to talk, she uses this with her kids, but unfortunately she wasn't able to be here tonight, so I'm filling in to share this information with you. The Family Plus, $14.99 a month per line. So if you have multiple lines, that's going to add up, right? If you have 2 or 3 kids that have a phone, $14.99 per phone. But then you get all of these other settings where you can manage their screen time, restrict content, set scheduled blackout periods. So in the screenshot here, Mrs. Hudak had it set up where she has totally different schedules for during school, where they're completely locked out of their device except the phone, and then a nighttime schedule between 11:30 and 6 where they can't use the phone at all, right? And then similar to the other solutions that we've talked about tonight, you can restrict apps, and then you can also set how much time you want your child to use each of these different categories: messaging, gaming, videos, etc. Bark. So I tried this in the name of science. So I purchased a Bark home, and I put Bark on all my kids' devices over the last 2 weeks. Again, they were thrilled about this. It was like Christmas. Not really. So Bark, again, what's unique about this particular solution for parental controls is that you actually sign into your kids' accounts through the Bark app. So what I mean by that is it's going to ask you, does your child have a Pinterest account, a TikTok account, a Facebook account? Do they have email? And when you're setting this up, it's going to have you sign in to all of those services that your child is using, all right? And like I said, that is unique to Bark. None of the other things that we've talked about tonight do that, right? And it will scan the contents of those accounts for inappropriate content, for cyberbullying or anything else, all right? So like I said, that is different than screen time, family link, anything else that I've talked about. Right, so you link the Bark app to the actual login of your child's apps, right? So that it can scan their social media accounts, their email accounts, right? And you choose the level of sensitivity for the alerts that you want, right? So if you want to be alerted for every single thing, you can certainly do that, or you can set it where you're getting alerted for the most severe instances of inappropriate content. And there's a couple different ways that you can use Bark. They do offer a phone. It's $40 a month. Again, I believe that doesn't come with cellular service, but I could be wrong. I didn't buy the Bark phone. I'm not sure that would be too popular with your children. It's not the latest and greatest. There's also the app that you install on their device, right? And so there's the Bark Junior, and we'll talk about what that includes for $5 a month or $49 a year, or Bark Premium, which gives you a couple more features for $14 a month or $99 a year. That's for every device in your household, by the way. It's not per device, right? So you're paying $14.99 a month. That's for any device you want to put it on. And then the Bark Home, which is what I also purchased, that's something you hook up like a Circle to your network, and then that controls or manages all the devices that you have at home that you can't put the Bark app on, like an Apple TV or Fire TV or Xbox, all right? So here's the breakdown. So Bark Junior, again, usual suspects: block websites, block applications, you can set screen time. The Premium is where you're able to have the level of insight where you're signing into your child's accounts or having Bark sign into your child's accounts where you're getting those notifications. And then the Bark Home, like I said, is a little box. that would protect everything else in your house, or you could set parental controls for everything else in your house. And it is nice. It does have a really nice guided setup. It walks you through every step. It says, okay, did you put the app on your, it has a QR code. It'll show you how to install the app on your kid's phone, on their tablet. It walks you through everything, how you sign into their accounts. There's an option where you can ask your child to sign into their accounts for you, or you can sign into their accounts. But again, it has a pretty streamlined setup process for as much as it does. And again, this is, like I said, this is kind of table stakes, right? You can block apps, allow apps, etc. What I struggled with using this was a couple of things. One, it's a little bit more, and it's not tremendously expensive, but it's more expensive than the other options. If you want to pay for a whole year, it's $100 and then $80 for the home, which I think you really need, because you put the Bark app on their mobile device, and then you have to have that other piece to have parental controls on everything else that you have in your house. It really slowed down my internet connection. I don't know if you have this, your children play multiplayer games. If they talk about latency and ping, or that's ever come up, it totally destroyed my internet at home, having that on my network. And even on the device, with having the Bark app on the physical phone, like my daughter's phone, it made it really, really slow. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but be aware that if you use a product like this, like I said, like the Disney Circle or the Bark, it's really going to impact the speed of the internet. The other things that are kind of, the other two things that are kind of confounding, one, you can't set max time for device use, which is interesting. So you can't say, well, you can only use your device for 2 hours today. It doesn't have that option. And you can't monitor how much time they're spending in each app. So those were two weird omissions that, again, I don't know why that was left out of Bark. And then the last thing I want to mention, has anyone heard of Firewalla? No one? Anyone? Bueller? No? Okay. So these are firewalls made for consumers, made for families, made for small businesses. And these are people that used to work for Cisco, used to make really high-end networking equipment, and now they make routers for families, one for cybersecurity and two for parental control. So if you want really granular control over all the devices on your network, and you want to get notifications for, like, if somebody downloads a really large file, or if your child is connecting to a website that's in a totally different country, this will give you all that, right? It's very powerful, but I would say you need a little bit of technical expertise. It's not impossible. They have really good guides. They have, not too terribly difficult, but more difficult than setting up just your regular Wi-Fi. Some additional resources to mention. One is this Connect Safely website. They have guides on a variety of topics, from social media to different devices. Again, all geared for parents to how to sort of have discussions and set parameters for their children. And then also Common Sense Media has a lot of really great FAQs and parent tips. So what I want to leave you with is just a couple of thoughts. One size does not fit all, right? Every household is different. Your children are all very different. Your environments are different. Your requirements may be totally different than my requirements, right? You may want different controls. So again, everything that I've talked about tonight, certainly, that gives you a really good foundation, a strong foundation if you use those tools, if you use Apple Screen Time and you use Family Link, and you maybe look at a router that's going to give you parental controls. But again, none of these things are foolproof, right? None of them are complete. There are ways, I'm sure, if not now, someone will figure out how to circumvent them. What I would say is the most important thing is to have those discussions with your children about using, whether it's the internet or social media or gaming, and build those relationships with them and have that honest conversation. I think those two things have to happen, because you can spend as much as you want on software and hardware, but you still have to have that connection with your kids and still talk about those things, even if it's difficult. And we've taken the phone away from my daughter multiple times, where she's gone into a rage and basically, tore out of the house. I'm just kidding. She didn't tear out of the house. She busted through the wall. But like the Kool-Aid man. But that's equally as important is, again, having those lines of dialogue open. And and it's tough. It certainly is. Because like I've tried to restrict my daughter. She doesn't have access to social media other than Pinterest. That's kind of the one option we gave her. But again, when all her friends are using all of these different social medias, but I'm like, that's fine. I'll be the bad guy. Because I feel like in the long run, like restricting them is, and again, giving them those guardrails is really important. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate everyone coming out tonight. If you have further questions, certainly email me. I am happy. I'll reach back out to you about what's available for the other carriers, for AT&T, T-Mobile. And then again, there's the link for the presentation for the slide deck if you're interested.
Screen time monitoring that you're doing, does it include screen time at school, or is that?
Everything. So Apple Screen Time would monitor right from the moment they wake up to the moment they put the device down.
I meant that someone had talked about WAMs and the high school are doing like a monitor your
Screen time challenge?
Screen time challenge.
Can
yeah.
you use it for that?
Well, or are you like,
We're not.
okay.
Yep, we're using their app for
Well,
that.
they are, but we're not setting any controls.
No,
But
no,
we're
I understand
encouraging
that.
them to look at it,
Yeah, I
yes.
understand.
We've actually done a few exercises in like our administrative discussions and with students, some of the student panels where we ask them to look. Yeah, you're saying, are we teaching them how to use the screen time?
It was at the front of the discussion, you had said we're asking them to monitor their own screen time. But does the screen time that they're doing in school not really count for that because that's educational screen time?
Well, no, because yes, it does count towards that.
Okay, it does.
Because they shouldn't be doing anything. The educational piece shouldn't be on their phone. Should be on the Chromebook.
Oh, sorry. So it's the phone device. I thought you meant it was like any screen.
Use of their phone,
Okay.
specifically their phone.
Got it.
I mean, yeah. Certainly those other things do come into play, right? The amount of time, and that's not part of the discussion. But if you read through the screen time challenge, it's really just trying to get kids to think about their usage. And it's probably more heavily focused on social media and games and things that are not productive or educational. But when you dig into what Mr. Beavers just showed you, you have to see some of those things that you might consider productive are also part of those tallies. So it does take some time and some looking.
So I was going to go through some of the other questions here.
Oh, you have some?
Is there guidelines on how many hours and at what age a kid should have access to their phone? I usually just look at again, this isn't me, but I look at the recommendations from the American Society of Pediatrics, at least for my younger kids, what their recommendation is for the amount of screen time. I'm sure that, again, there's other opinions on, and Mrs. Fox may know better than I, but like I said, I look at the American Society of Pediatrics, and that's what I've based for my 4-year-old, for my 7-year-old, for my 13-year-old, what their recommendations are for kids at that age. Do they go over that? Yes. It's impossible, I guess, to try to toe the line all the time, right? And say 2 hours, you're done every day. It doesn't work that way. But as much as possible, try to stick with those recommendations. Parent of an elementary school student, but are high school students allowed to have their phones on in school at all times? I'll let.
Sure, I can answer that. Can everyone hear me?
There's another mic if you want.
No, I'm
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
So yes, students currently are allowed to have their phones with them. They are not allowed during academic instruction. So we have something called a FOTEL. So students are supposed to put their phone in the FOTEL in the classrooms so that they are not distracted by them during instruction. I can tell you they are distracted by them during instruction. They know they're there. They can see them hanging in this, little pocket device. And the second, and when I go in and observe certain classes, as soon as the teacher says that they can pack up, the kids make a beeline for their cell phone and they're checking it. Kind of blows my mind a little because I'm like, isn't everyone here who want to message you? So they are allowed right now to have them.
It's certainly one of the things under discussion is whether they should be allowed to in non-instructional times. Right now they are. Hold on, we have a couple questions here.
Yes, that is only.
That's just the high school.
Yeah, middle school students are, must have, they can have their phone, but it has to be away. It's supposed to be in their bag. I think there's kids who, you know, don't always follow that, but middle school kids are supposed to have theirs away.
Couple questions?
I have a couple of questions. First of all, the screen time and family link, you said that under 13 account creation required by parents, right? Does the kids need their personal email address different from parents?
Yes, so for the screen time, you would have to set up an iCloud account. So for each of my children, for my daughter, and now she is 13, but before that, my two boys, I did set up an iCloud account for them. And so I have, go ahead.
They do need a separate iCloud account.
Correct, right, because that's what you're going to use to log into or sign into the device that you want to have parental control over. Same thing with Family Link. You would need to create a Gmail account for your child. And again, you would have the credentials. I save, again, my children don't know what those credentials are. I have them saved, but yes, you have to create the account for them if they're under 13.
The other question is my kid just a fifth grader, so he just bring the school Chromebook home. I was wondering with the Chromebook, does he able to browse? He said the school does not allow them to, but I just wonder if they able to browse other websites like YouTube website or at home with a school Chromebook.
YouTube, yes, we don't block because teachers do use that as a resource, but anything that would be considered inappropriate, again, we have to filter those devices just like we do here at school.
So you can filter the content like one level down to, I mean, even though you can use YouTube, but some certain content will be filtered out.
Correct.
Okay. Also, sorry, in the family link, in the screen time you mentioned, if the kids use browser instead of app, it cannot block. So does that also true to family link?
So in both those cases for Family Link and screen time, you can restrict and say, I only want them to have access to these websites. But that, in my mind, that's going to get very tedious because you're going to have to put in, if you say only these sites are allowed, you don't want to be entering a site, if there's 20 sites, 30 sites that you want your child to have access to. That's where what I was saying, I think in that case, you might want to use, again, if they're at home, you could use a router to do that where you could say, I want to block all social media sites for that device, right? But again, you can, but it's a manual process is what I want to say. It's not where you can say, like, when my child opens up Safari or my child opens up Chrome, it's going to block carte blanche, every gaming site. It's not going to do that. You have to say, these are the ones they can use, these are the ones I want to block.
You have a question?
Yes. Desperate mom here. I have a son who goes to 9th grade, a freshman in high school. Up until this year, everything was under control. I was always the bad mom who put the screen times, the downtime, the limits, etc. during middle school, and I thought everything was under control up until he started high school. He had a smartphone, but he didn't have an internet package on his smartphone during middle school, so he was just SMSing or calling when he needed. But we had to sign up for an internet package when he started high school because all the other kids, including for the schedule checking, which is a rolling schedule that the kids need to see where they have to be. Just for that reason, I was convinced to get him an internet package. And then we agreed to put for weekdays 1 hour, and then weekends we put 3 hours playtimes, etc. But at one point everything got out of control. today he has 7 hours in average screen time just because of one game that is for some reason able to go over all the limits that we try to put. The name of the game is Brawl Stars. So that game doesn't take into consideration the 1 hour limit that we adjust in his devices per day. So all the kids during lunchtime, study halls, etc., they get together and play together. And yeah, 7 hours for a school kid in a weekday is way too much, in my opinion. So,
So can I ask what you're using? What are you using to restrict it right now?
The screen time.
And did you block the app when you went in to restrict the amount of time that he has? Did you specifically select that app and say you have only this amount of time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not only for, I mean, that specific game and application is restricted, but also overall gaming time and screen time is also restricted, but everything goes blocked except that specific game. So I was going to ask you if there's any specific recommendations you would.
And you don't think he's
would
accessing
make?
it through the browser? Like he's not doing it through Safari on his iPhone?
I
or-
asked him if he installed an additional application to overcome the limits. He said no. But yeah. And my question to the managers, do the kids really need to have a phone at school? These phone hotels are nice, but can you think about having them just put it while entering the building all time during the day? Just a reflection and question. And
Yeah.
again, that's
It's a very good question, right? And that website I showed you in the beginning is exactly what we're talking about right now. So our goal is to have this dialogue in the fall and sort of think carefully before we make any kind of change that would be difficult to enforce or cause problems that we don't want to cause. So we're doing that right now. So your dialogue and your input is really important in this process, coming to the book talks, finding these different ways of sharing. And we're working on the how. Like if we were going to do what you described, how would that look? And
But your feedback is valued, because the reality is that no, students should not need their phones during the day. They have a school-issued device in which they should be doing any work that the teacher is giving them on that school-issued device. Some students will use their phone because it's more convenient and they find it to be easier and they want to use their phone for it, but that's all part of the discussion too, is this idea that we don't want them to have the phone, right? We don't want them using their phone. We don't want them checking their notifications from Snapchat from their friend who's in study hall while they're in global history. And so these are all
some of the
parts
readings that we've been doing that are posted, there's the multitude of resources that are growing and sort of exploding out there right now, explore the impact on their thinking and their mental health and their learning and their focus. And so we're coming to this discussion to try to partner with the community. I know that the township is looking at the same thing. We sort of are working in conjunction with them too, because it's not something that we can just do in the school, right? And it's also not something that perhaps parents can just do at home. So we are looking for your input, and so that's very helpful. Anybody else?
I was just going to come back to your
Okay.
question about, so I had just a couple thoughts. One, maybe ask him to show you how if he, again, in fact, is circumventing how he's spending 7 hours, maybe try disabling the browser, so when you go into the screen time settings, you can completely turn off their access to Safari, so they wouldn't be able to go to anything through the browser, and see if that maybe there's a correlation between that and the amount of time that he's spending on that game. Just off the top of my head, those would be the two things that I would.
Okay. Run right here.
So when my child turned 13, Family Link said, that's it, you're done. How do I get her back into Family Link?
So you should be, I believe you should be able to add them back if you go back to your family group in Google and then you invite them with their, whatever their current personal Google account is, you should be able to add them back and then sign into the device that you're trying to manage with that account. But email me if it does, just email me if it doesn't work, and I'll be happy to go down the rabbit hole and figure it out.
This doesn't have to do with screen time or app limits, but there was something that you mentioned earlier about Family Link that I just wanted to share that helps us. In Family Link, you mentioned about playing the sound on the device. We have Apple devices, and occasionally my son will not answer the phone, and I don't know if he's just not answering it because I don't want to answer it or he's not hearing it. But on the Apple devices, I go to Find My, and I click the sound button, and it literally goes off. And then he knows I need to call home. So
Does he come down to dinner? Because my daughter doesn't come downstairs.
But because it's annoying, right?
Yeah.
So it happens. And the other thing that I just wanted to say is we did the Bark app. And the one thing that I loved about the Bark app, however, there is a lot of sensitivity to it. You do receive, like if there's any, bad language, or you receive the entire text message exchange with all of the children's names, everything, and you're able to review it. It is very, very sensitive though. I mean, if a child says HELL, it alerts you. So there is the sensitivity, but it is really nice that you get the entire exchange.
Is it possible on the Chromebooks when they're at home, on the home Wi-Fi, to limit YouTube or things like that?
You could, I mean, if they're, so
Is
they
that-
are, again, they are getting restrictions because.
If it's a school-issued Chromebook,
Yeah,
but
but
it's
you,
being
yes,
used at
you
home,
could,
yeah.
right. So if you wanted to, on your home network, right, you could look at the parental controls that you have. I don't know what you have in your house right now, but yes, you could.
Okay.
You could enforce those on the district-issued Chromebook.
Thanks.
Sorry, say it again?
So the school login, can I add the kids' school login to my family?
You can't. So any Google Workspace account, including those, yeah, if it's for school, you can't add that to Family Link. Only personal accounts. All right, well, there's just real quick 2 more that came through. So have you heard of the Griffin router? I have not, and I will look that up because I have never heard of that. And do the routers restrict content and time on laptops? Yes. And won't the kids likewise be distracted by Chromebooks during class time, websites, chat functions? How is the school monitoring Chromebook usage at school? So that's a good question. So we're monitoring, we actually have a couple things in place new this year where we're looking at both amount of screen time that's being spent on the Chromebooks and then also what tools are being used so we have a better understanding of, again, how the Chromebook is being integrated into the school day. So that's, again, something that will tie into this discussion, something that we're, again, very focused on. And, we do our best to make sure that they are using for educational purposes. And like I said, we have multiple layers to ensure that that happens.
Are you familiar with Hapara, which is a district software that we do use from grades, get me right, 5 up? Nobody's familiar. I just mention it. It's a piece of software that the teachers have access to. They're not required to use it, but it's a classroom management tool. And so from the teacher's desktop during the lesson, students are signed into their Chromebook when they're using it during the lesson. The teacher can see every screen for every student in their classroom. And so they have some controls at their disposal. They can create what's called a focus session where they select the websites the students are allowed to use during that lesson, or they can restrict certain ones. Or if they don't set those restrictions, but that they see that the student has pulled up YouTube and they're not supposed to, they can just close it from their screen. So that, and, you know, they also can send them individual messages if they see, like if they're working on a writing lesson, and they can look at what the students are writing and give them feedback during the lesson. So it's a little bit more efficient sometimes for them as well. So that is a classroom management tool that the teachers have access to, that does help in a lot of different ways you might not think of, right? So even I remember one of your teachers, a 5th grade teacher, was kind of had the idea that when they're arriving in the morning, if he sets the focus session so they're limited into what they can go to while he's doing everything to get the day started, he doesn't have to worry about what they're doing because he's preset what they're allowed to do in that sort of, it could be a lesson, it could be an activity, it could simply be reading something, but he has control over it so he doesn't have to worry what they're doing while in that 15-minute block of time. So there's a lot of different ways teachers use that particular tool. I'm not sure. You have to ask some of the parents. I think it could be any of those things. They might not have their own device. They might not have a separate device. I would be surprised if they don't know that they're being monitored. That in itself is a classroom management tool, right? That's a detractor from the minute like the lesson starts, that they know that they're potentially being watched. No, that's for the staff in school on the Chromebook devices.
Don't want to open a whole nother conversation, so just a yes or no answer is fine, but is like AI being monitored on the school devices?
I'm not sure what you mean by being monitored.
Like going on to ChatGPT, like for,
I mean, through Learn.
Well, I guess there's two answers. One, right now, I don't think we have anything actively turned on that is sanctioned by the district, that is, like you said, ChatGPT or Gemini or any of those things. Like, we're still in the process of figuring out how we want to use it and what that looks like. Obviously, we can't block it on a personal device, so if a student is using ChatGPT on a phone, that's out of our control.
but they're not blocked on the school device?
No, they're definitely not blocked. And there's a few cases of teachers actually using it instructionally to show kids how it works and even have them try out, you know, generating a prompt or things like that. But we are in the middle, like one of our district goals this year is to consider policy revisions around AI. So we're sort of trying things out and, you know, doing some research and attending some professional development and kind of trying to go down the right road with that, because we don't think that we should restrict it entirely. We think we need to teach them how to use it appropriately, but at what age are sort of some of the questions that we're exploring. Correct. There's some, yeah, contractual, you know, like it is, with or without that,
Like how prevalent is it?
with or without that, it's a violation of academic integrity, right? So it's not your own writing. So the question is, how do you know when that's been done, you know, or used to generate a piece of writing or revise your writing? So it's sort of involved, and, you know, you would generally have a discussion with the student and talk to them about their paper, and if they can't really tell you what they wrote, then somebody wrote it other than them, whether it was a robot or not, might not matter. So we are talking about those things, and yes, teachers are very concerned about it, right? Because they're limited in their ability to know when a student has used that. They can sort of tell when it's a different voice than what they've heard come out of that particular writer, and so that might lead them to ask some questions. And it's a tool too. You can have students run their work through some of the AI generators so they can like look at what happens. You know, if they put in a prompt and it generates something, is that something you would want to turn, you know, like, so let them exactly examine how the software works and doesn't work is also a really good instructional approach that we're considering and using. It is a can of worms. You were right about that.
That's
Yeah, maybe that'll be a technically speaking. Good. Thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you
Really
very much.
appreciate it. Send questions, and we hope to see you again.